Matt Parker, who always makes it happen. So thank you, Matt, and his great team of volunteers and staff in the kitchen. They always manage to make a special dinner. There are two other people that I just really have to thank. The first is Ryan Lovern, who is in charge of putting this thing on tonight, and she has obviously done a fantastic job. So Ryan, thank you so much. And last, but certainly not least, and I'm sure if Ryan were standing up here right now, she would say the same thing, and that is Megan Texer, who we couldn't have done this at all without Megan, who always makes us look so good. So thank you, Megan. Our theme this year was growing our heritage. That reflects the long history of our church. As you all know, we're about to celebrate 150 years of ministry here at First Pres, and what a heritage that is. We are blessed with a strong foundation. But we also wanted to capture the excitement that we all feel about the next chapter we have under Richard's pastorship, and we're excited about what comes next. And I think we all have a sense that we're not done yet after 150 years as a church. So with that in mind, I'd like to ask John King, our treasurer, to come up and give us a quick update on our church finances for 2022, the wrap-up of our capital campaign, and our budget for 2023. Thanks, John.
Thanks, William. And for those of you who may or may not know me, I'm John King. I'm your current church treasurer, and let me say that first of all, you've made my job mighty easy, so thank you for all those continuing contributions that you do and support in so many different ways. So I'm just a couple of really quick comments about the finances of the church. Much like other aspects of our church, whether it be staff, programming, or facilities, the overall message is that financially we're in good shape. And so I think that that is really due primarily to all of us. And the continuing support, financial support that we've all done, particularly over the last 2 years when we've had very, very different environment. Sometimes we've had to pause in-person activities, etc., but we have continued to financially support the church in so many ways. And so I think that's a credit to all of us for that. And, of course, I'm counting on you to do that in the future, too. So I'm going to talk about, very briefly, 3 different areas, as William mentioned. I'm going to talk about a little bit about what those of us in the accounting profession would talk about as our cash flow, basically, our receipts and expenditures that we have for the current year activities. I'm going to talk a little bit about the status of the capital campaign, and then I'm going to touch on very briefly about the budget for next year, the 2023 budget. So, first of all, talking about the current financial activity for this year, 2022. Compared to last year, both receipts and expenditures are higher than last year, which I consider to be a very good thing. Pledge receipts, however, are significantly above last year, which makes it a very positive situation. But the higher expenditures, I think, is also very positive because that's reflecting more in-person activities, whether it be youth mission trips or retreats, Wednesday night suppers that we're now able to get together, and so many different activities that we're now doing in person. So also, as with our homes, and we also have some unexpected maintenance expenses. In the church of this size, and even though this is a new facility right here, we have some older facilities as well. So we've had some unusual and unexpected maintenance and repair activities for the last year. And so whether that includes activities for the roof or HVAC or the kitchen equipment to keep Matt and his crew going, etc. But the fortunate part of all that is that we've been able to fund all of these repairs through the current pledge activity that all of us contribute to the church. So in addition, this year we've, and I think most especially, we've been able to give our staff a much-deserved pay increase. And those of us who worked in industries, we didn't take it for granted, but we took for granted that we were probably going to get a pay increase pretty much every year unless we had a year like 2007 or something like that. But during the past 5 years, we've only had 2 of those years in which the staff has received a pay increase. And so that's very, very deserving that they have one this year. And as we will talk about next year's budget, there's something proposed for that as well for next year. Very well deserved. So overall, as far as our normal kind of operations, we're in good financial shape. The next area is our capital campaign. And it's on the little placard there that I had to go back when I was looking at some notes. The capital campaign was the invited campaign. It started in 2017, and it's been completed for some time. In fact, I've kind of forgotten about a lot of the stuff that we did, and so I had to kind of look at some notes. And so some of the things that we did the porte-share, we did the cluster walk, we did the parking lot extension. We had some property, and we did a very good job of that. The playground out front, we have the children's ministry area, and the sanctuary, choir, robing, and rehearsal room, and other things as well. The total cost of the project was approximately $2.7 million, and that included $100,000 for benevolences. And we have paid all but $30,000 of those benevolences out. We know what that $30,000 is going to be earmarked for. It's an issue of timing, basically, to disperse that as well. So while we didn't borrow money from a bank to finance the construction of this, we did, in effect, borrow from ourselves through the endowment fund that we have in order to basically fund the construction cost as we continue to get pledge receipts in over a number of years. So we have been paying back the endowment fund for that advance. And we have about $53,000 left to basically pay ourselves back for that advance that we did from the endowment fund. Now, our member contributions have been very strong in the capital campaign, but we still have about $90,000 remaining of unpaid capital campaign pledges. So if you have any questions about where you may stand on that, either contact me or Sue Shuffler in the financial office about that, and we'll be glad to help you with that. And then finally, the last thing I want to talk about is next year's budget. And you'll see this in your packets that you have on your desk. Thank you, Megan, for clarifying and straightening up all the stuff that I did on the graph. But in any event, you can see that the preliminary budget for next year is just over $1,300,000. And the process that we go through, we ask all the committees basically to get together and make plans for what they want to do next year and then put some dollars assigned to it. And we ask them basically also not to take what I would refer to, or Jay Crane actually coined the phrase, not to hunker down. Basically, we need to reinvest in ourselves and our activities that we have in order to continue the nice growth that we've had in the church. So the $1.3 million basically represents about an $80,000 increase over this year's budget, or about 6%. Some of the more significant changes that are included in the budget for next year include basically youth and adult mission trips. We're going to be back full force in that. We're going to also increase our support to the Presbyterian. The family ministry is up because we're going to Montreat for our congregational retreat next February. Hope all of you will be able to attend that. As I mentioned before, the staff is going to have a pay increase for most of the folks on the staff as well. And we do plan to pursue hiring a permanent youth director as well. Property is up due to the expected utility rate increases. You know, inflation is with us, and the utilities basically will pass those along to us as well. We might as well recognize that, as well as extra cleaning services that we anticipate for the facilities. And the preschool program, which is a really highlight. We really do, and Sarah does a terrific job with her folks on that. The plan is for next year for them to offset all their expenses with anticipated receipts So they break even of about $130,000. So the next step that we all have basically is to turn in our pledges on Pledge Sunday or shortly thereafter. And so the process then is that the Finance Committee gets together and they pull together that information and other to come up with the projected budgeted receipts for the budget itself. And then at early part of December, we will present that to the session for their approval. So that's the total process. So as I started out, really, the overall message is that like so many activities and things going on in our church, we're in good shape, and I'm sure that we'll continue to do that. Okay? Thanks.
Thank you, John. I know we're all ready to get to the main event, so let me just wrap up and remind you our theme is growing our heritage, and as John mentioned, our budget really reflects that for this coming year. We are a blessed congregation, and I ask you all to consider what's next for this church as you think about your 2023 pledge. So now, before we get to the main event, get ready to smile. Enjoy a year in the life of First Pres Hickory.
for those of you that may not know me. And I'm here tonight. I was asked by the Stewardship Committee to introduce Richard. I hope by now most of you have met him. But if you haven't, please do. He's a wonderful, wonderful person, and we are so excited that he and Emily and their family have chosen Hickory, and he has chosen to lead us. Tell you real quickly about when we were conducting this search, the 7 of us. In our first conversation with Richard, and we had been led to Richard. We'd heard all these great things about Richard, and we had a Zoom call with him. And in that Zoom call, we were all like, wow, this guy's pretty impressive. And as we had done with others, I followed up with him a couple of days later, and I said, Richard, we're just curious, what's your level of interest and what did you learn? And turns out Richard had been courted by, 7, 8 churches or more maybe in his discernment process. And First Presbyterian Hickory was a small church in a small town, and I think, as he said, we surprised him, fairly said. That led us into much deeper conversations, thankfully, and obviously brought us to calling him enthusiastically to be our next senior pastor. I want to share with you some of the comments that we heard about Richard from folks that have known him a lot longer than we have. George Stroop, who was, I believe, a professor at Columbia, describes Richard this way. He's a compelling, imaginative, and poetic preacher, an insightful teacher, a compassionate counselor, and an experienced administrator. He's also deeply committed to the Presbyterian Church's ministry of reconciliation and social justice, especially in regard to the ecological crisis that confronts us, as evidenced by his book, Down to Earth. Richards also has an uncommon ability to be an effective pastor for all ages in the congregation. Another comment. He interprets Scripture in a literary style that is poetic and imaginative. Richard uses language that invites listeners into the heart of the biblical text, and they end up seeing God, themselves, and the people and world around them in a light of the good news. His preaching touches the heart and stimulates the mind and generates a host of questions designed to lead those listening to an honest examination of their life and faith. What we discovered as we got to know Richard as the search committee, we found him to be incredibly genuine, very unassuming presence, great sense of humor, very attentive, and a terrific preacher. So a little bit about Richard. Richard grew up in Merritt Island, Florida, which is near Disney World and Cape Canaveral. His parents worked in the space program, and Richard was raised in the Baptist church until the age of 13. And on his own, he chose to join the Presbyterian church. One of his first jobs when he was a young man was at Disney World. Richard was goofy. I mean the character. After earning his bachelor's degree at Florida State in 1994, he went on to earn his Master's of Divinity at Columbia and his doctorate in theology from Emory. Richard has served churches in Atlanta, Chicago, and he comes to us from Trinity Presbyterian Church in Atlanta, about a 4,500 member church. Is that about right? Pretty large church. He served there for 7 years, and most recently had served as their senior associate pastor and their interim head of staff as their church went through a similar transition. He has edited a series of devotionals with Walter Brueggemann, as well as written a book, Down to Earth, Christian Hope and Climate Change. Friends, I'm honored to introduce tonight's speaker. He's our new senior pastor, and he's my friend, Richard Floyd. Johnny.
There's really nothing worse than having to just sit there and take it while people say nice things about you. I like to say I'm still goofy, I'm just not getting paid for it anymore. It's an honor to be here tonight. It truly is. I mean, this is a beautiful evening, and just to be here among you, I feel blessed. I feel privileged. So thank you for making space for me in your life. I want to tell you a story about Bill Jinks. Now, Bill Jinks is not a member here at FPC. In fact, he's a member of Shallowford Presbyterian Church in Atlanta. That's where my wife directs the music program, and that's where my daughters grew up. And one summer, not all that long ago, Emily and my older daughter, Anna, left town, leaving me to look after my younger daughter, Ella. Ella had vacation Bible school that day, and it was my job to get her there. And I thought I did a pretty good job. Her clothes may not have matched. Her hair may have had a piece of gum in it. Did she brush her teeth? I don't know, but I got her there on time, and my work was done. Except a couple of hours later, I got a call from one of the volunteers. I had forgotten to pack a lunch for Ella. Now, Ella was always a little anxious, and when all the other kids started pulling out their lunches, her anxiety shot through the roof, and she started to cry. And so they called me, and I immediately stopped working on my Father of the Year acceptance speech and, threw a lunch together and raced over to the church. But when I got there, Ella was sitting with a group of friends around a table, and she was chatting and smiling and eating a sandwich. Turns out one of the volunteers, a man named Bill Jinks, had seen Ella upset, and he took the sandwich that he had packed for himself, and he gave it to her for lunch. Now, the truth is, I don't know very much about Bill Jinks. He died a few years ago. I know he had health problems. I know he had had a difficult childhood. And I know that he was alone for much of his life. In some ways, the deck was stacked against him, and he could be forgiven for becoming cold toward a world that was cold to him. Yet somehow, he kept his heart warm enough that when he saw a sad and scared child, he acted with kindness. It was such a small thing, just a sandwich. He didn't save the world that day, but he did save the world for my daughter in that moment. And I don't think it's too much to say that it ever so slightly changed the trajectory of her life, bent it just a little bit more toward trust, toward kindness. I think it was a glimpse of the kingdom of God. And I'm not sure that sacred moment happens without church. There are plenty of scared and sad children in our world, and it's not always clear to me that we're prepared as a society to do everything we can to care for them. Too many fall through the cracks. And we all know people who have been beaten up by life, and so they become closed off and small and bitter and angry at the world. We all know people like that. That could have happened to Bill Jinks. But their paths, Ella's and Bill's, their paths crossed in church. Church where Bill learned that he was loved, despite the sometimes cruel indifference of the world, where he found hope and community and meaning and purpose, where he had the opportunity to reach beyond himself to show kindness to a child in need. And Ella, in her moment of need, when too many children are met with that same cruel indifference of our world, she was met with kindness. She was met with grace. Why am I making such a big deal about such a small thing? Because I think it's a miracle. Anytime people overcome the harshness of life, anytime people transcend the indifference and self-protection so many of us learn the hard way, anytime people's loneliness and anxiety is met with kindness and grace, it's a miracle. In that moment, the world tilts ever so slightly in the direction of goodness. And that can happen in all sorts of ways, in all sorts of places, but maybe especially it happens because of church. Church is far, far from perfect, but it is that place where we create space for people to be healed, for people to be loved, for people to experience grace. So that's my big pitch to you all tonight. And I mean it with every fiber of my being. There are all sorts of reasons why we give. We give as an expression of our gratitude for what God has given to us. We have, each of us, been amazingly blessed by this community, by family and friends, but also by life itself. Every breath and every blade of grass and every moment of kindness and every face you've ever kissed, all the sunsets and the pouring rain, all of it. So many gifts, grace upon grace. And so we give out of gratitude for all of that. And we give as a way of remembering and proclaiming our values, what's most precious to us. As Jesus said, where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. So we give to make sure that our money is following our heart and not the other way around. But we also give because our giving creates a space where holy things can happen, where a broken man can find hope and meaning and healing and purpose, where a scared child can find compassion and security and friendship and trust. The word for all of that is grace, and it happens here. And it happens because of God's abundant love, yes, but it also happens because of the generosity of people like you. You heard John talk for just a minute about the budget that we're looking at for 2023. And I want to say a little bit about that. When you look in your packets, you're going to see a breakdown of our budget. And there's a section that's dedicated to mission spending. And First Presbyterian has been and will continue to be deeply committed to ministries of compassion that push us beyond our own walls. Through Jeremiah, God tells us to pray for the welfare of the city. Well, this congregation puts its prayer into action, working for the welfare of the city in countless ways, and that will continue. But as I say in the letter, in a sense, it's all mission. It's our mission to worship and give thanks to God. It's our mission to care for one another. It's our mission to grow in faith and understanding. It's our mission to nurture our children and youth and families. It's our mission to welcome our neighbors. It's our mission to spread the hope and love of Christ to a world in need. It's all mission, all the way down. I do want to say one more word about the proposed budget for 2023. It is an increased budget, as John said, and one of the increases proposed is for a cost of living adjustment for staff who have been here a year or longer. COVID has been an incredibly difficult time for all of us, and church staffs are certainly no exception to that. Our staff has navigated this time with tenacity and grace and creativity and kindness, doing what they can to make this a place where holy things happen. And I think it's appropriate for us to express our gratitude to them. And the other significant increases that John talked about are really about our young people. We want to invest more in mission trips for our youth. I suspect how many of you have been on a mission trip in this room or have sent your children on a mission trip in this room? I see most of the hands are up. I can tell you from firsthand experience how transformative these trips are, especially for young people. They broaden minds and soften hearts. It gives our youth a chance to give and receive grace. And if our church, if our world is going to have a future, It will be because we have a new generation of leaders who know a thing or two about grace. So let's do our part here at First Presbyterian. Finally, the budget raises the ceiling on what's possible for a new youth director position. We are so fortunate to have Ashley and Lisa leading our youth program this year, and we're so fortunate to have such an amazing heritage here at FPC of vital programs for our young people. We want to be able to conduct a thorough search to find the best possible person to join us and help us to grow that heritage so we can continue to be a place of grace for the young people in our community. So that's our theme for this stewardship season, growing our heritage. It's a recognition that we have been blessed by God in so many ways, and also blessed by the faithfulness and the generosity of all those who've come before us. And now it's our turn to grow that heritage, to invest again in our people and our community so that we can be a place where holy things happen, where people can find hope and meaning and healing and purpose, where young people can find compassion and security and friendship and trust. This is our joyful calling to redeem the world, one person, one child, one sandwich at a time. We already have an amazing heritage. Let's grow it together. Thanks be to God. Amen.
Well, I'm the liaison from the session to this meal and everything that we have tonight from the Stewardship Committee. And I want to, on behalf of the session, thank all of you for coming here tonight. Our first in-person stewardship dinner since 2019. So you've been bagpiped, serenaded by our children, welcomed by Heather so that you were in the right place, not in the wrong place. You got to see a movie. You heard from John King, our treasurer. You've heard from William Pleasant of our Stewardship Committee as the chairman. You've heard from Ty Poston, the chairman of the Pastoral Nominating Committee. And you've had a wonderful meal that's been prepared by Matt Parker and his staff. And finally, you had a terrific talk by Goofy, which I just found out was here tonight. I didn't know we had somebody like that. But Ty was always talking about how great the man was. So we have a great man and Goofy in one man. So we're very fortunate to have that. Thank you for doing that. Now it's your turn to be part of this program, because this is what this is really all about. It's you and what you can do financially to support this church so that we can be a church that follows God's purpose for us, for our involvement in the community, both here and abroad, and for you. So there's only three things I want you to do, and you don't have to do much of this tonight. The first thing to do is to make sure that your table has filled out one of these, which is a record of you all are here, who you are, so that we don't have to mail you a packet later. So make sure you get that done. That's the first thing. The second thing is you should have a packet like this, which is the stewardship packet. You don't have to do anything with that tonight. Just take it home, review it. It has in there a very thoughtful letter to the congregation from our new senior pastor, Richard Floyd, a pie diagram from John King of the 2023 budget, and this little thing. This is where the rubber meets the road. This is the pledge card. And this you don't have to turn in tonight either, but take it home and determine what you can do to help the church, to answer God's call to you, and what you can do in support. And this does not have to be returned until November 13th, which is Pledge Sunday. You can also do it on the website of the church if you want to do it that way, or just come into church with it. Any way will do, but November 13th is the date when most people bring these cards into church at Pledge Sunday. Now, the most important box is this shaded yellow big box. That's the annual pledge amount that you need to fill out. Whether you're doing it by the week or by the month or once a year, that goes in there. And it's a big box because there's supposed to be big numbers in there. That's the biggest box on this card. So we'll appreciate any numbers you put in there. There's lots of work that was put in by lots of people to put on this event, and I thank all of you, and I thank all of you, and you can thank them by your generosity and your pledges. Thank you.
Well, what's there left to say? We have an incredible opportunity to be able to contribute to continuing to create a space where holy things can happen. We have an incredible heritage. Let's grow it together. And as you go out tonight, may the Lord bless you and keep you. May the Lord be kind and gracious to you. May the Lord look upon you with favor and grant you peace now and always. Amen. Go in peace.